Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. My name is Amirul Nazwan bin Muhammad Yunus.
And my name is Najib Hakim Harith bin Saparuddin, and now we'll be presenting our research with a title of Factor Influencing the Amount of Food Waste Generation in Malaysia. First, let's start with the research background. So, food refer to food that has been rejected for human use, whether it has been held over its expiration date or has spoiled. Food waste has a significant influence on sustainability since it linked to the high level of greenhouse gas emissions and resource depletions. Food waste can occur at any point in the food supply chain, including agricultural, industrial manufacture, processing, retail, and also domestic consumption. According to Malaysian Solid Waste Corporations, also known as SW Corp, food waste in Malaysia has reached 15,000 tons per day in 2015, including 3,000 tons that were needed for consumption and should have not been dumped. This study is designed to examine the factors of food planning, confusion of information of debt level on food product, and also over purchasing food to the amount of food waste generation. Now, let's proceed with the problem statement. Do you know that food waste on a global scale is on its way becoming a billion-ton disaster? According to the United Nations Environment Programme 2021 Food Waste Index, an estimated that 931 millions of food are being thrown away each year. People in Malaysia also have thrown away 930 tons of unfinished meal per day. This is equivalent to wasting of 930,000 of 10 kg bag of rice every day. It is indeed clear that Malaysians do not have a food scarcity problem, but rather a food waste problem. The average of Malaysian household throw away 0.5 kg to 0.8 kg of uneaten food per day. As Malaysian population is predicted to reach 33.4 million by 2020 and 37.4 million by 2030, this problem is expected to be worsened in the coming years as a result of economic development, population growth, and urbanization. Despite the fact that almost a third of the world food is wasted, 868 million people still suffer from hunger and malnutrition. All citizens must remember that the issues of food waste not only link to socio-economic and environmental concern, but is also an ethical issue that must be addressed. Food waste accounted for 41% of the total weight of waste component in urban areas like Kuala Lumpur in 2020. The SW Corp Federal Authorities has urged the Malaysian citizens to be more attentive because continuing waste will result in greater contaminations from the leachate, including soil, river, and groundwater pollution. It will also spread diseases by allowing the insect and pests to breed, as well as raise landfill upkeep expenses. In order to finish this research, we have identified the research questions, which is the first one is what is the relationship between poor planning and food waste generation? The second one is what is the relationship between confusions of debt label on fruit product and the food waste generation? And what is the relationship between overpurchasing food and the food waste generation? While for the research objective is to examine the relationship between poor planning and the food waste generations, next is to determine the relationship between confusion of debt label on food product and food waste generations, and lastly is to identify the relationship between overpurchasing food and food waste generation. This is the conceptual framework of our research, which is the first independent variable is poor planning, the second one is confusion of debt level on food product, and lastly is overpurchasing food, and the dependent variable is food waste generation. For the first independent variable is also our first factor influencing the food waste generation, which is poor planning. Poor planning can be defined as one of the primary reasons for food waste is the failure of consumer to properly plan their meals. The second factor, which is also the second independent variable, is confusion of debt label on food product. The meaning of this confusion of debt label on food product is often to save it after the printed date have passed, even if the quality has been deteriorated. The last factor, which is also the last independent variable, is overpurchasing. It is defined as the search, selection, purchase, receipt, or storage and final usage of product in accordance with the establishment of catering policy. Now, let's proceed with the hypothesis development for the first hypothesis of the first factor, which is poor planning. So the HO1 is there is no relationship between poor planning and the amount of food waste generated. And the HA1 is there is no relationship between poor planning and the amount of food waste generated. Next is the hypothesis for the second factors, which is confusion on information of that label on food product. So the HO2 is there is no relationship between the confusion on information of that label on food product and the amount of food waste generated, and the HA2 is there is a relationship between confusion on information of that label on food product and the amount of food waste generated. So lastly is the third factor of food waste generation, which is over purchasing food. So the hypothesis of the HO3 is there is no relationship between over purchasing food and also the amount of food waste generated, and the HA3 is there is relationship between over purchasing food and also the amount of food waste generated.
I will explain about the research methodology that was used in this research study. For the research design, in order to achieve the objective of this study, cross-sectional design by quantitative method will be used. Then, this study will focus on the poor planning, confusion of date labels on food products, and over-purchasing food, which is the factor influencing the amount of food waste generation towards Faculty of Administrative Science and Policy Studies (FSPPP) students in UiTM Seremban 3 for both degrees and diploma. According to the UiTM Negeri Sembilan official website, the total FSPPP students in UiTM Seremban 3 is 3,250. According to Cranchi and Morgan 1970 table, the recommended sample size for 3,250 is 341. Therefore, 341 respondents are chosen to answer the questionnaire related to the factor that influence the amounts of food waste generated. We move to the sampling technique. The sampling technique that will be used in this study is non-probability sampling method. Hence, convenience sampling will be used as a non-probability sampling method for this study. Next, the measurement for this study is by Likert scale. Based on the variable employed in this study, a series of a questionnaire will be constructed to collect data from respondents. The purpose questionnaire will be cover 5 sections. Section A, demographic profile. Section B, food waste generation. Section C, poor planning. Section D, confusion of date labels on food products. And lastly, Section E, over purchasing food. As an extension of bivariate correlation, multiple regression will be used in these investigations. Next, the test of normality. The squeeness value should be between negative 2.0 to positive 2.0 and kurtosis between negative 7.0 to positive 7.0. Show normal distribution, and the pilot test must be conducted to gain access to proposed research framework and analyze some logistical issues before the full-scale study begins. Next, for the reliability test, the value less than 0.5 are considered poor. Those between 0.6 and 0.7 are considered acceptable, and those above 0.8 are considered good. Then, Pearson to test hypothesis correlation will be employed to create connection between dependent and independent variable. Based on the demographic profile of respondent, in this study, in terms of gender, this study involved the majority of male with 207 respondents, 59.3%, and female with 142 respondents, 40.7%. Then, for the age of the respondent, most of the respondents aged between 22 years old and above, with 207 respondents, 59.3%, and followed by 21 years old and below with 142 respondents, 40.7%. In terms of program codes, most of the respondents are from AM120 with 114 respondents, 32.7%, followed by AM225 with 77 respondents, 22.1%, AM110 with 76 respondents, 21.8%, followed by AM228 with 64 respondents, 18.3%, and lastly AM226 with 18 respondents, 5.2%. Next, in terms of current academic undertaking, this study identifies that the majority of the respondents are resident with 186 responses, 53.3%, and followed by non-resident with 163 responses, 46.7%. Finally, in terms of how often they eat per day, this study identified that most of the respondents eat thrice a day with 142 respondents, 41%, followed by eat twice a day with 140 respondents, 40.1%. Then eat more than 3 times a day with 48 respondents, 13.8%. And lastly, eat once a day with 18 respondents, 5.2%. Based on the hypothesis testing, it stated that there is correlation between food waste generation and poor planning. R equal to 0.778, P equal to 0.0. Hence, we rejected HO1 and accepted HA1. Next, there is correlation between food waste generation and confusion of date label on food products. R equals 0.766, P equal to 0.0. Hence, we also rejected HO2 and accepted HA2. Then, there is correlation between overpurchasing and food waste generation. R equal to 0.665, P equal to 0.0. Hence, we rejected HO3 and accepted HA3. Multiple regression has been utilized to meet the 3 objectives of this study. The correlation between all 3 independent variables, which are poor planning, confusion of date labels on food products, and overpurchasing food with food waste generation, were significant influence. Then, we move to the recommendation on how to reduce the food waste generation. The first one is by integrate food waste prevention and education campaign. Campaign for information can be used as a tool to support social change. There were 17 interventions that made the claim that they had decreased the food waste. Then, campaign can also be implemented in school to teach students and teachers better planning technique for grocery shopping and the reduction of food waste. Next is by understanding best before labels and expiry dates. We can solve this issue by understanding best before labels and expiry dates. Lastly, to reduce the amount of food waste, we can adjust food needs as required. It is a good idea to check what is in your fridge and pantry before going to grocery shop. If necessary, remove everything to avoid essential purchasing stuff you don't even need. Additionally, make sure everyone in the family will be home on each planned cooking day of the weeks, and you will therefore only need to purchase what you require to feed the number of people you intend to feed. In conclusion, overall, this study is about the factor influencing the food waste generation in Malaysia. This study is very crucial to be conducted in Malaysia since food waste generation can bring a lot of negative effect to the environment. We waste not only the food itself but also the water and energy needed to grow, harvest and transport. This research has shown that there is a significant relationship between all variables, which are food waste generation, poor planning, confusion of date labels on food products, and overpurchasing toward food waste generations. Lastly, we hope that all parties should take action to give an effort to reduce the food waste generation, including the societies and even the government itself. We can conserve the land, water, and energy that would have been required to produce food that we do not consume for the future generation.